It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog.
Are you ready to get down to business? Join seasoned entrepreneur, community leader, and Army veteran Scott Shalom Klein, who will take you behind the scenes with those who work in America's small business scene and speak with leaders making an impact, creating jobs, and telling their story in entrepreneurship. So let's get down to business. On AM 560, The Answer, here's your host, Shalom Klein.
And indeed, we are all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship in business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts on my website at syklein.com. While you're there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you'll not want to miss. I'm thrilled to kick it off with an individual who has practiced and studied leadership as a CEO of many multi-billion dollar businesses, as a professor at Columbia University's Graduate School of Business, and as a consultant to some of the world's biggest and best known organizations. And I'm thrilled to invite Willie Pietersen onto the program. Willie, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Shalom.
It is truly a pleasure to have you on. And your book, Leadership, The Inside Story, it sounds fascinating. Can you give us a brief overview of what our listeners can expect?
Yeah, sure. Let me give you a little summary here of the main points. Leadership is a critically important component because it's the factor at the end of the day that inspires people. And the first kind of threshold understanding of leadership is that it's about people. Management is about things. Leadership is about people. And it's not just a random set of decisions that one makes in a bold kind of way, nor is it simply a question of exerting power. It's a deliberate, very intentional philosophy of how we lead, what our guiding principles are, and how we go about inspiring others. So like any other skill, understanding the key ingredients, the fundamentals of what leadership is the first requirement for excelling at it, because we need to have a way of assessing how well we're doing, a measurement system, if you like, a compass. It's what Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, called your command center, your own individual command center. Here's what I offer people as a perspective as they begin to build their leadership effectiveness, is that leadership at the end of the day consists of three domains. Personal leadership, that's our own individual principles that guide our actions and inspire others. It requires deep self-knowledge. That's the threshold requirement. That is permission to lead. That's the fundamentals of character. Second domain of leadership is strategic leadership, giving the organization a clear set of priorities and a winning way. And the third domain of leadership is interpersonal leadership, bringing out the best in others. These three domains work in a way that is mutually interdependent. They each support each other. And I think good leaders are integrated leaders, bringing all three of these into play to address the various challenges that confront us. So that's my basic philosophy, and that's the springboard, if you like, for the book. And the book then explores aspects of each of these three domains of leadership.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with Willie Pietersen, the author of Leadership, The Inside Story. It is a fantastic and a fascinating read, and you've just given us a little glimpse of some of the areas that readers or our listeners can expect. And I want to dive a little bit deeper because in the book, I know you mentioned the importance of nonverbal communication for leaders. Can you share some examples of how nonverbal cues can impact a leader's effectiveness?
Yes, absolutely. And we often overlook this aspect of leadership. We think that leadership is all verbal, explaining what needs to be done, inspiring people through brilliant speeches. What we forget about is that everything we do is symbolic. Everything we do has symbolic fallout. When you're a leader, everybody is watching and looking for cues. Now, I'll just give you one example that in my own life was a real guiding principle. I was born and raised in South Africa, and my father was a humble guy. He was a station master. And when the Second World War came, there was no conscription in South Africa. The war was far away in Europe, 6,000 miles away. But he decided to volunteer. And we had a young family. I was only 6 years old. My sister was a few years older. And off he went to go and serve up north. He came back safely. When he left, he didn't know where he would be deployed, how long he would be away, what he'd be involved in, and whether he would survive. But he simply did it. And I remember conversations that happened between him and my mother when she asked him why he was doing this, sacrificing potentially his life. And he simply said, because it was the right thing to do. That was my initial lesson in leadership. He did not make a speech. The only words he said is because it was the right thing to do. What he was demonstrating, and I've tried to emulate throughout my life, was the importance of moral courage. Physical courage is doing skydiving or whatever it is just for the thrill of it. Now, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Moral courage is different. It's doing something at risk to yourself simply because it's the right thing to do. And you do it regardless of the circumstances. So often we see in leadership there's an absence of this kind of moral courage, but it's the demonstration of it that has had the lasting impression with me. No speech was made. I just watched and I learned. It taught me that this is what leadership is all about. You know, Ralph Waldo Emerson made a wonderful observation when he said, as a leader, what you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say.
Well, Willie, there's so much more that's in your book, and you mentioned the surprising benefits of taking walks. Can you elaborate on how walking can enhance creativity and problem solving?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it started just as a habit to enhance my fitness that every morning before going to the office, I took a 2-mile walk. I live in New York City, so this was through Central Park, and I measured it as a 2-mile walk. And something very interesting began to happen. Problems I'd been wrestling with my team or analyzed very deeply, but had not yet found a solution to, suddenly entered my head, uninvited. And I thought, well, this is kind of just something that happens to me. It's kind of a quirk. And then I began to understand through other examples I looked at that when you free up your mind, change your mental state from struggling with a problem, go for a walk, or go scuba diving, or go to the theater or read a book, ideas come into your mind that had not been there before, even though you haven't invited them in. And so that's a crucial thing to do. And, there are so many examples of these great breakthroughs that happened while people were going for a walk. Nikola Tesla, for example, at the initial stages of electrification, direct current was not a very good model. It was Thomas Edison's model because you needed a lot of substations to transmit it in long distances. So alternating current was the obvious answer, but it was very difficult to pull off. And he tried for many years and couldn't. And then about a year later, he went for a walk in a park in Budapest, and the answer flew into his head. And now we have alternating current and widespread distribution of electricity. It happened during a walk. Einstein used to play his violin to calm his mind and allow these thoughts to enter. And up came E equals MC squared.
I love it, Willie. There's so much more that's packed into this great read. It's called Leadership, the Inside Story, Time-Tested Prescriptions for Those Who Seek to Lead. I know it just came out just over a month ago, and you share so many penetrating and often surprising insights from a lifetime of experience as a business leader. Willie, there's so much more I could ask you, but I also don't want to give away the secrets over here. Willie Pietersen, how can our listeners find out more about Leadership, the Inside Story?
Well, the best way, I guess, is to go onto Amazon, and the book is there. It's going to be published on September the 10th. It's available for pre-order now. Or you can go onto my website and see that book and other writings as well, williepietersen.com.
Well, Willie, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our listeners. Certainly enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to having you back on and hearing from our listeners how this book has enhanced their leadership skills and style. We'll link in our show notes at syklein.com or wherever podcasts can be found. We make it super easy for you to stay in touch with all of our guests. And speaking of other guests, we've got a lot more in store for you this week on Get Down to Business. Don't touch that dial. You could always find Get Down to Business wherever podcasts can be found. Just search for Get Down to Business. But do me a favor, my friends. Be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share so you don't miss a single week. Again, we'll be right back on the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship.